Hi everyone, this is Megha. I am a final year MBBS student and I take every topic of prof importance and try to recall that with you all so that it may be of some help to you too. So today's topic is from general surgery named nutrition. Before nutrition, we need to know that what is starvation. So starvation basically comprises of 7 things, that is the insulin level in the plasma goes down, the glucagon level in the plasma goes up. So what will happen? What insulin does? Insulin will reduce the blood glucose levels, but because insulin level is low and glucagon level is high, therefore the blood glucose level increases. This is happening in starvation. This has to happen if the person has to stay alive. There will be hepatic glycogen lysis. There will be protein catabolism, lipolysis, reduction in the resting energy expenditure, and adaptive ketogenesis. Very simple 7 points. Next we come that if there is stress, so in the first 24 hours, the weight of the patient increases because of these things, but then in the next 10 days, the weight will decrease by 15%. So this was all about starvation, very basic. Now we come to the main topic, that is nutrition. What we all have to read, the basic points in nutrition are 5 to 7 points which we have to learn in detail. From that we can crack many PG questions also, and if any question arrives as a short note in your university, then you can very well write that. So there is, if the patient's nutrition is not good, there will be accelerated catabolism, the immunity of the patient will decrease, the wound healing will also be delayed, and there will be increased morbidity and mortality. So we have one assessment test which is called as subjective global assessment, which is done for checking the nutritional status of the patient. In this we have 6 to 7 parameters. What are they? Let's see. First of all, whenever a patient comes, we have to see his detailed clinical history, that if this person was like this from childhood only, or he has started developing this weight loss and these starvation signs and nutritional loss signs now only. So there will be detailed clinical history. We will check the body weight of the patient. We should know that at his age what is the ideal body weight and what body weight that patient is carrying. Next, we will see some anthropometric measurements. For example, the skin fold thickness, the mid-arm circumference. Very simple things which we also see in pediatrics. Then check the BMI of the patient. BMI is calculated by weight in kg upon height in meter square. Some biochemical markers are also seen. For example, serum albumin, pre-albumin, transferrin levels. Main is albumin levels are checked. Then we see the immunological functions of the body by seeing at the lymphocyte count and indirect calorimetry. It is very important. In this we check the volume of oxygen consumed and volume of CO2 produced. Then we calculate something called respiratory quotient, which is calculated by volume of CO2 produced divided by volume of oxygen consumed. Then if respiratory quotient comes out to be between 0.7 to 1, it is adequate. Less than 0.7, underfed, and more than 1, the patient is overfed. So through respiratory quotient we checked the nutritional status of the patient, and it will also help us to calculate that what will be the calorie requirement of this patient, and it helps us to find out if the nutritional support has to be given to this patient from outside or not. Easy enough. Now we go to another thing, that is a must tool. So if I recall everything, first of all we learned the 7 basic points of starvation. Then we learned that what happens in nutrition, that catabolism increases, the wound healing delays. Then we learned that how do we do the assessment. For assessment we had 7 to 8 features, that is BMI, weight of the body, anthropometric measurements, lymphocyte count, and respiratory quotient. And we learned something about respiratory quotient. It is volume of CO2 produced divided by volume of oxygen consumed. and it will tell us that whether the patient has to be given the nutrition from outside or not. Easy enough. Then we come to another thing, that is the MUST tool. It is Malnutrition Universal Screening Tool. It is used to decide if we have to give the nutritional support to the patient from outside or not. So we go in 3 steps, that is, we will see the BMI of the patient. We will see that how much weight the patient has lost in the previous 3 to 6 months. And if there is any disease, that is the acute disease, and it has effect that there has been or is likely to be very little nutritional intake for more than 5 days. Like patient has been suffering from a disease and since 5 days he is not eating any food. We get this type of history. So we will say that this patient is under malnutrition. So there is some scoring given under this MUST tool, and scores are given from 0, 1, 2. For BMI, if BMI is coming more than 20, we give score 0. Between 18.5 to 21, less than 18.5, 2. And for weight loss, if weight loss in the previous 3 to 6 months is less than 5%, score given 0. 5 to 10%, score given 1. More than 10%, score is given 2. And score is already 2 if the patient is having this disease condition and he is not taking any food. So then we do the total scoring, that if score total comes out to be 0, then patient needs a routine clinical care and there is no need of supplementing nutrition from outside. If the score comes out to be 1, then you observe the patient and then decide if the condition is worsening day by day. We will give the patient food or nutrition from outside. If a score is more than 2, then definitely give nutritional support from outside. So in the acute disease, we already had the patient score 2. So this patient has to be given the nutritional supplement from outside. One Viva question I forgot to tell, that what is significant weight loss? Significant weight loss is if there is more than 10% weight loss in the previous 3 to 6 months, it is called significant weight loss. That is more than 10% weight loss. So we have learned well enough for MUST tool. MUST tool से हमने पता लगा लिया that which patient has to be given the nutrition from outside and which has not to be taken nutrition from outside. So suppose we get a patient that we have to give this patient a nutritional supplement. So the ways of giving the nutritional supplement are enteral route and parenteral route. So out of parenteral and enteral is obviously preferred because it is more physiological and it will also maintain the mucosal integrity and it will prevent the mucosal atrophy. It is a cheaper way and it prevents cholelithiasis also, because the gallbladder will be in movement and there will not be any gallstone formation, and it has fewer complications. But there are still some contraindications for enteral nutrition. They are if the vomiting of the patient is not stopping, diarrhea is intractable, there is acute intestinal obstruction, paralytic ileus, mesenteric ischemia. You can very well see that if there is intestinal obstruction, why will you give him food enterally? If paralytic ileus is there, then why will you give it food enterally? Mesenteric ischemia. If there is severe type of short bowel syndrome, patient has high output enterocutaneous fistula, that is more than 500 ml is coming out of the fistula only, unstable patient and massive GI hemorrhage. So they all are contraindications for enteral nutrition. So they automatically becomes the indications for your parenteral nutrition. And for parenteral nutrition is also given in cases of severe pancreatitis, burns, like the mucosal lining of the patient is burnt. So how will it take the food? So enteral route is ruled out here. Due to chemotherapy, if the patient is vomiting again and again, so then parenteral route will work. And if patient has anorexia nervosa. So these are very well understood that what are the enteral and parenteral contraindications and indications and why enteral is preferred because of these 5 reasons. Then we come to the type that we have decided, yes, we will give this patient enteral nutrition. So what is the way of giving enteral nutrition? It can be orally you give the patient, or you give through a tube, and tube can be Ryle's tube, nasojejunal tube, or surgical tube. So out of oral and tube, obviously oral is preferred because it is more physiological. And in the tube feeding, we have Ryle's, nasojejunal, and surgical. If the patient is hospitalized for less than 4 weeks, then go for Ryle's tube or nasojejunal tube. And if it is hospitalized for more than 4 weeks, then go for surgical tube feeding. If the patient needs tube feeding for less than 4 weeks, go for either of these two. Out of these two, we prefer the Ryle's tube. ठीक है. अब इनकी कुछ कॉम्प्लिकेशंस हो सकती हैं राइल्स ट्यूब की और निसोजेजुनल ट्यूब की. ये क्या हो सकती हैं? ये पर्सन एस्पायरेट कर सकता है फूड पार्टिकल्स, एपिस्टेक्सिस हो सकता है क्योंकि आप नेजल म्यूकोसा के थ्रू उसको ट्यूब को अंदर तक भेजेंगे, तो इट कैन इरिटेट योर नेजल म्यूकोसा, सो इट कैन लीड टू एपिस्टेक्सिस. देयर कैन बी गैस्ट्रिक अल्सरेशन, ऑक्लूजन, डायरिया और माल पोजिशन. दिस यू नॉट नीड टू learn just aspiration, epistaxis, it will work. So Ryle's tube is preferred. So how do you measure the length of the Ryle's tube? The length of the Ryle's tube is measured from nasal ala to earlobe to epigastrium. If this is very getting difficult for you, then you can easily measure the length from other method, that is from earlobe to umbilicus. Then it is, how is the Ryle's tube put? Ryle's tube is put in the semi-recumbent position with neck flexed. Like a patient is sitting in a semi-recumbent position, in that position only you put the Ryle's tube. Once Ryle's tube crosses the oropharynx, then you tell that take water, and then with swallowing only the Ryle's tube will easily get inside. And how will we confirm that it has reached stomach? Obviously, what we do, we auscultate the epigastrium with the stethoscope after giving 50 ml of air in a syringe, and a gurgling sound is heard in the epigastrium. So we say that yes, Ryle's tube has reached the stomach. If it is not possible, then you can do the X-ray, because the Ryle's tube will give you the radio opaque line. After this, we come with the surgical tube. Surgical tube, there are two methods. One is PEG, percutaneous endoscopic gastrostomy, or feeding jejunostomy. Out of these, feeding jejunostomy is preferred. It is done via laparoscopy, and there is risk of aspiration is less, and there are some complications of enteral feeding, that is diarrhea, and there can also be chances of pneumatosis intestinalis. So not need to go in detail, just know that enteral supplementation of nutrition is done. It is preferred. It can be done either orally or it can be done through tubes. If done through tubes, it can be Ryle's, nasojejunal, or surgical. Ryle's and nasojejunal for less than 4 weeks, surgical for more than 4 weeks. Out of Ryle's, nasojejunal, Ryle's is preferred. Ryle's की length is measured by from earlobe to umbilicus. Then it is put in a sitting position, and if it crosses the oropharynx, it can take the sip of water and go via a swallowing process, and it reaches the stomach. We can hear the gurgling sound. Surgical tube, two methods are there, PEG and feeding jejunostomy. Out of these, feeding jejunostomy is preferred because उसमें aspiration के chances are less. Just this much in surgical tube. Then we come to parenteral nutrition. Parenteral nutrition can be given through your peripheral veins or the central veins. Out of these, central veins is preferred because whenever the nutrient is given, it has the chances that it can lead to intense inflammation, and it can cause thrombophlebitis. Thrombophlebitis is possible in narrow vein, which are peripheral veins, but it has less chances if it is given through a wider bore vein, that is the central vein. Therefore, we prefer the central vein. And peripheral vein, there are two types of cannula, short length and long length cannula. Again, long length cannula is preferred because of the same reason of thrombophlebitis. Then vein preferred in central veins, which all veins are preferred? Subclavian vein, internal jugular, and external jugular. Out of these three, subclavian is preferred most. It is written here, MCQ question in AIIMS, vein preferred to provide the nutrition is subclavian. And when will you give peripheral and when will you give central? The Peripheral or the PIC. This long length cannula is also called PIC. The peripheral or the PIC lining can be done if you have to provide nutrition for less than 2 weeks and osmolality is less than 900 milliosmol per liter, because then the chances of thrombophlebitis will be less. But if the patient has to be stayed in hospital and given nutrition for more than 2 weeks and the osmolality is more than 900, then you go with the subclavian vein for longer time of duration. And which cannula is used in subclavian vein? That is the Hickman line. Central catheter is used. We use a catheter here. Then comes another thing, that is calculation of the energy requirements. So how will you calculate that how much energy is needed by this patient? So that is done by a equation called as the Harris-Benedict equation and indirect calorimetry. This we have learned previously also, that CO2 and oxygen consumption wala formula. The preferred one is Harris-Benedict equation. Harris-Benedict equation से आप पता लगा लेते हैं that what is the patient's resting energy expenditure. So total energy expenditure has to be calculated, because when the patient has a stress condition, the catabolism is happening and the energy requirement increases automatically. So instead of resting energy expenditure, we calculate the total energy expenditure the patient is going on. So we multiply stress factor with the resting energy expenditure, and these are some diseases. These are the stress and these are their stress factor. These you can learn or not learn according to your suitability. I just tell you that if there is no disease process, the stress factor is 1, minor surgery 1.1, major surgery 1.2, skeletal trauma 1.35, head injury 1.6, severe infection 1.8, burns 1.4. So out of multiplication you will calculate the total energy expenditure. You don't learn these are not usually asked, just for knowledge I have written here. Then value of total energy expenditure does not go beyond 2000 kilocalories per day. आप एक दिन में एक पेशेंट को कितना न्यूट्रिशन प्रोवाइड कर सकते हैं? That is only 2000 kilocalories per day. Then you come to see the components of nutrient, that is carbohydrate, lipids and amino acids. So पूरे nutrition में से 50 to 70% is by carbohydrates, 10 to 30% is by lipids and 20% is by amino acids, and remaining is by trace elements, vitamins, micronutrients and immunomodulators. What immunomodulators we use? This is given in SRB: alanine, glutamine and arginine or omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids. These are your immunomodulators. And this is the extra point, that if patient has hepatic encephalopathy or patient is having some respiratory problems, then proteins and lipids are not given. No need to go in this, just learn this much, that we have that nutritional bag. In that we can give 2000 kilocalories in one day. Out of 2000 kilocalories, we give 50 to 70% of carbohydrates, 10 to 30% of lipids and 20% of amino acids. That is total parenteral nutrition given maximum in a day is 2 liters only, not more than 2 liters. अगर आप 2 liters से ज़्यादा दे देंगे तो refeeding syndrome can happen. So to prevent refeeding syndrome, in the first day only half of that bag is given. Then on second day 75% amount can be given, and third day 100% of the amount, that is full 2 liter, can be given. These are the 4 features of refeeding syndrome, very important, you should learn them. There is hypokalemia, hypomagnesemia, hypophosphatemia and hypoglycemia. So these things, that is your potassium, your magnesemia, that is your magnesium, and your phosphate, KMP you can learn, and glucose. These are going in hypostate in the refeeding syndrome. If they give you full on first day, then refeeding syndrome can occur. Therefore, we divide it like half on first day, second day 75%, third day 100% of the bag is given. And due to this refeeding syndrome, you can have myocardial dysfunction or neurological disorders. Then there are some complications. So complications of this parenteral nutrition is divided in immediate complications for less than 2 weeks and for more than 3 months if the patient is on parenteral nutrition. And the complications are again subdivided into mechanical complications, biochemical complications and some infections. सो इन्फेक्शनल कॉम्प्लिकेशन इमीजिएटली अगर आपने उसको पेरेंटल न्यूट्रिशन दिया है और 1-2 दिन में आपने डिस्चार्ज कर दिया है तो कोई इन्फेक्शन के कॉजेज होते नहीं हैं ज़्यादातर, पर अगर 2 वीक से 3 मंथ्स तक पेशेंट आपका है तो उसको इन्फेक्शन हो सकता है, एंड द इन्फेक्शन का एक ही कॉज हो सकता है, दैट इज CRS, कैथेटर related sepsis. What is catheter related sepsis? Catheter related sepsis is when the catheter tip culture and the blood culture reveals the same organism. So for this you take blood from the central catheter and the peripheral vein also. If number of organisms in the blood taken from central catheter is 5 times, then it is CRS. It is mandatory therefore to remove catheter if CRS is found and put new catheter in the different vein. This is about CRS. Now we are just left with some mechanical and some biochemical complications which can be for immediate, different, less than 2 weeks and more than 3 months. So in mechanical, the immediate complication can be pneumothorax. A question asked in AIMS, pneumothorax you should remember. And then for immediate, the biochemical complications can be hyperglycemia followed by fluid overload. Then come to less than 2 weeks, there is catheter occlusion, and in biochemical we have hepatic enzyme dearrangement, hepatosis, acid base disturbance, electrolyte disturbance. Just remember in biochemical in less than 2 weeks it is electrolyte acid base disturbance, this much you remember. और कैथेटर आप ब्लॉक हो सकता है आपका, दैट इज कैथेटर ऑक्लूजन. इफ मोर देन 3 मंथ्स कैथेटर फ्रैक्चर ही हो जाता है, ठीक है. इमीडिएट कॉम्प्लिकेशंस में आपका मैकेनिकल न्यूमोथोरैक्स, लेस देन 2 वीक्स के लिए कैथेटर ऑक्लूड हो गया है और मोर देन 3 मंथ्स के लिए कैथेटर फ्रैक्चर हो गया है. इन्फेक्शियस आपकी इमीडिएट में होती नहीं है. लेस देन 2 वीक्स के लिए CRS, मोर देन 3 मंथ्स के लिए CRS. जस्ट लेफ्ट विद बायोकेमिकल. इन बायोकेमिकल for less than 2 weeks, just remember acid base disturbances, electrolyte disturbances, this all. In biochemical remember hyperglycemia. First of all start with more and more of glucose, है ना. And if it is more than 3 months, then you have the essential fatty acid deficiencies followed by deficiency of trace elements like zinc. So सबसे ऊपर आपका ग्लूकोज ग्लाइसीमिया ज़्यादा था और सबसे लास्ट वाले में डेफिशिएंसी होगी फैटी एसिड्स की. जस्ट टू रिमेंबर आई एम क्रिएटिंग अ लिंक, एंड सेंटर में आप लिख सकते हैं दैट लिवर के एंजाइम्स काम करने बंद हो गए, एसिड बेस्ड डिस्टर्बेंसेस, इलेक्ट्रोलाइट डिस्टर्बेंसेस हो गए हैं. Then next page has something for CRS which we have already learned, and in CRS the organism responsible is staph epidermidis. This you can remember. And if the patient is on TPN, we have to assess these parameters: the body weight of the patient, the fluid balance, the blood count, and if the body weight is increasing more than 1 kg per day, that is the patient is overfed, so lower down your feed. You have to see daily the body weight, the fluid balance, the blood count, urea,